Musa Okafor stepped out of his black SUV and saw the nanny he had just fired walking through the rain with his missing money hidden inside her worn cloth bag. Rage burned through him. He had thrown her out in front of everyone. He had called her a thief in front of his daughter. And yet something about the way Amara walked unsettled him. She did not walk like a guilty woman escaping. She walked like someone carrying pain too heavy to explain. So Musa followed her. Street after street, the city grew darker, poorer, quieter. Then she pushed open the door of a crumbling house, and what Musa saw inside made his blood run cold. Before we go on, tell me this: if someone took money to save a life, would you call it theft or sacrifice? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. If you enjoy emotional stories with twists that stay with you, subscribe and join us for more. The mansion felt wrong without Amara. It was still enormous, still polished, still silent in the expensive way money could buy. The marble floors reflected the hanging lights like still water. The glass walls looked out over Lagos traffic and distant towers shimmering under the late afternoon heat. Every object was in its place. Every cushion was aligned. Every curtain fell in a perfect line. But the house no longer felt alive. Musa Okafor noticed it the moment he stepped back inside after following Amara's taxi all the way to the edge of the city and then forcing himself to turn back before she could see him. He had seen enough to disturb him, but not enough to understand. The image would not leave him: the rusted gate, the cracked walls, the thin little boy on the mattress, the old woman with clouded eyes reaching for Amara's hand like it was the only steady thing in the world. He had gone after her to confirm her guilt. Instead, he had returned with something far more dangerous: doubt. A servant approached him carefully near the staircase. "Sir, should dinner be served now?" Musa loosened his tie without looking at the man. "Where is Naya?" The servant hesitated. "In her room, sir. She refused dinner again." Musa turned slowly. "Again?" "Yes, sir." He stared for a second longer than necessary. The servant lowered his eyes and stepped back. That had become the new rhythm of the house in less than 24 hours. Staff walked quieter. Doors closed more gently. The cook no longer sent cheerful desserts upstairs for Nia. The child who once laughed loudly enough to fill 3 floors with sound now stayed behind one locked door. Musa climbed the stairs. He did not like the knot building in his chest. He told himself it was irritation, a temporary disruption. Children were emotional. They adapted. She would adapt too. At the door to Nia's room, he knocked once. No answer. He knocked harder. "Nia." A long silence. Then softly from inside, "Go away." His jaw tightened. "Open the door." "No." He stared at the painted wood as if it had insulted him personally. Nia had never spoken to him like that before, not directly, not with that tone. She had cried before, sulked before, withdrawn before. But this cold refusal felt new. It felt like punishment. Musa lowered his voice. "Nia, open the door now." Another pause. Then the lock clicked. The door opened just enough for him to step in, and he found his daughter curled near the window seat, knees pulled to her chest, her face turned toward the city outside. She wore the yellow sweater Amara always chose for rainy days because it made her look like sunshine. Her hair was half braided, half loose, as if someone had started caring for it, and then vanished mid-task. That sight hit Musa harder than he expected. He stepped inside. "Why haven't you eaten?" Nia did not look at him. "I'm not hungry. You need to eat." "I said I'm not hungry." He fought the urge to snap. "This is not how we speak in this house." That made her laugh once. Not with joy, with bitterness. Musa froze. Children were not supposed to laugh like that. Finally, she turned to look at him, and her eyes were swollen from crying. "What house?" He frowned. "What does that mean? This doesn't feel like a house anymore." For a second, something ancient and exhausted moved behind Musa's ribs. Then he shut it down. "You are upset because Amara left." "She didn't leave." Nia's voice shook. "You threw her away." The words landed cleanly, brutally. Musa looked away first. He moved toward the dresser, straightening a book that was already straight. "Amara broke the rules. You don't know that. She was seen leaving the office area. Money was missing. That doesn't mean she took it." He turned back sharply. "Enough!" Nia flinched, and in that instant he hated himself a little. But not enough to stop. Not yet. "You are a child," he said. "You do not understand everything that happens in this house." Her chin lifted. "Maybe I understand more than you." The air changed. Musa stared at her. There was her mother in that expression, the same fearless stillness before speaking a truth other people would rather bury. It unsettled him more than anger ever could. He softened his tone, but only slightly. "Nia, Amara worked for us." She crossed a line. "It is done. She didn't work for us like the others. She was an employee." "No," Nia whispered. "She was the only person here who stayed when I cried at night." The sentence split him open in a place he had kept sealed for years. He looked at the floor. Polished wood, imported rug, controlled breathing. After his wife died, everyone around him had been careful, efficient, respectful. Doctors explained things. Lawyers handled documents. Family members visited with sorrow arranged neatly on their faces. Even the grief had come to him in professional language. But Nia had been 6 then. She had not needed efficiency. She had needed warmth. Arms, stories, patience. The kind of ordinary human nearness Musa did not know how to give without feeling like he was losing control of himself. Amara had stepped into that emptiness quietly. She had not been part of the family, and somehow she had become essential to its survival. Musa hated that realization because it accused him without using words. He crossed his arms. "You will not speak to me this way because of a nanny." Nia's eyes filled instantly. "Stop calling her that like she meant nothing." He exhaled through his nose. "Hard. She was paid to care for you. She cared when she didn't have to. That one stayed in the room between them." Musa turned away and walked to the far wall where framed photographs stood on narrow shelves. One showed Nia at the beach 2 years ago, smiling beside Amara, while Musa stood slightly apart, phone in hand, already distracted by a business call. Another showed a birthday party in the garden. Amara was in the background, blurred, carrying juice boxes and napkins. Yet Nia's face in the foreground was turned not toward the camera, not toward her father, but toward Amara. He had never noticed that before. Or maybe he had noticed and dismissed it. "You are attached," he said quietly. "I understand that." "No, you don't." His shoulders stiffened. Nia slid off the window seat and walked to her bed. She reached under the pillow and pulled out something small, a folded square of blue fabric. Musa recognized it at once. One of Amara's headscarves. "You kept this?" Nia clutched it tighter. She smelled like soap and cloves. He said nothing. "She told me stories when the thunder was loud." Nia's voice cracked. "She sat with me when I didn't want to talk to anybody. She never got angry when I asked the same question 10 times. She remembered how Mama used to sing. She even sang the same song, even though she said she couldn't sing well." Musa looked at his daughter and felt every line of his carefully built life begin to shift. Because Nia was not defending a servant. She was mourning a person he had humiliated in his own living room without giving her even the dignity of a full explanation. He heard himself say colder than intended. If she was innocent, why didn't she defend herself? Naya's expression changed. Not sadness this time. Disappointment. The kind a child feels when an adult fails a test that should have been easy. Maybe because you already decided who she was. The truth of it struck so fast he nearly responded with anger out of reflex. But he stopped. He remembered Amara's face in the rain. Not pleading, not panicked, just wounded, and beneath the wound, pride. A woman who had been accused by powerful people in a rich house might cry or beg if she believed begging would help. But Amara had not looked like someone seeking mercy. She had looked like someone refusing to hand over her dignity. Musa rubbed a hand over his face. He was suddenly tired in a way sleep could not fix. Downstairs, a grandfather clock chimed the hour. Nia sat on the edge of the bed and looked smaller than before. "Did you eat today?" she asked, almost absently. The question surprised him. "No." "Then why do you keep telling me to—" "Because controlling your hunger is easier than controlling guilt," he thought. But he said, "Because someone has to be responsible." She stared at him. "Then be responsible." That silenced him completely. Not because of the words alone, because she meant more than food. Be responsible for what you did. Be responsible for what you refused to see. Be responsible for the loneliness in this house. Be responsible for me. Musa stepped toward the door, then stopped. Without turning, he said, "I will have food brought up. I don't want the food." "What do you want?" Her answer came so softly he almost missed it. "I want you to stop acting like money tells you who people are." He closed his eyes. When he left the room, he did not go to his office. He did not call a meeting. He did not review contracts or stare at market reports or bury himself in numbers the way he usually did when life became emotionally inconvenient. Instead, he stood alone in the upstairs corridor and listened to the silence of his own house. Below him, servants moved carefully, afraid of making noise. Above him, rain tapped lightly against the high windows. Inside him, a harder sound echoed. Memory. His late wife's voice. "You can protect your family, Musa, but if you only know how to control them, one day you will wake up in a palace full of strangers." He had dismissed those words back then. Too sentimental. Too dramatic. Now they returned like judgment. He went downstairs slowly and paused near the sitting room where Amara used to read to Naya every evening. One of the books still lay on the side table, a dried flower pressed between its pages. Amara must have left it there on her last day. Or perhaps Nia had hidden it to preserve something of her. Musa sat in the chair opposite the empty reading seat. For the first time since firing her, he allowed himself to ask the question he had avoided, because it threatened everything easier to believe. What if he had been wrong? And once that question entered the room, others followed mercilessly. Why had the office door been slightly open when he arrived? Why had Jabari, the longtime house manager, appeared so quickly with concern already arranged on his face? Why had the security guard from that shift called in sick the very next morning? Why had Amara, who had spent 3 years protecting his daughter from every small hurt, suddenly become capable of crude theft in his mind so quickly? Because she was poor, because she was easy to accuse, because suspicion had become more natural to him than trust. Musa leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at the empty seat where Amara once sat with storybooks in her lap and patience in her voice. The mansion had not changed. He had. Or perhaps the more terrifying possibility was this. He was only now seeing what he had already become. Musa did not sleep that night. He lay in a king-sized bed under imported linen, staring at the dark ceiling while the city pulsed beyond the glass walls. Lagos never truly rested. Somewhere below, tires hissed over wet roads. A siren rose, then vanished. Dogs barked in uneven bursts. Farther away, music drifted from a rooftop, gathering thin and ghost-like in the humid air. Inside the mansion, everything was still. But inside Musa, everything was moving. Again and again his mind replayed what he had seen at the edge of the city. The broken gate, the rusted corrugated roof, the house so small it looked like one strong wind could tear it apart. And inside it, Amara kneeling on the floor beside a thin boy whose cough came from so deep in his body it sounded older than him. A blind old woman feeling her way toward Amara's wrist with trembling hands as if touch were the only certainty left in her world. None of that fit the story Musa had told himself. A thief should have looked different. That thought disgusted him the moment it formed. Yet he could not deny it. Somewhere in him, without ever saying it aloud, he had built a picture of what guilt looked like. Someone poor, someone cornered, someone useful until they stopped being useful, someone whose need could easily become greed. And Amara had fit that picture too neatly. He rose from bed before dawn, showered, dressed in a dark shirt and plain trousers instead of his usual tailored suit, and walked downstairs while the house still slept. He did not want questions. He did not want staff trailing behind him with coffee reports or polite concern. He wanted something he had not wanted in years, the truth before anyone could polish it. In the kitchen he found the night cook clearing mugs from the counter. The older woman jumped when she saw him. "Sir, good morning." Musa nodded once. "Who worked the late shift yesterday?" She hesitated. "Myself. Chica in laundry, 2 security men outside. Jabari left after dinner. Did anyone mention Amara after she left?" The cook's hands slowed. "Not to me, sir. Did you see anything unusual the day the money went missing?" Now the woman looked frightened. Musa recognized the look. It was the expression of workers around powerful men, people trying to calculate whether honesty would cost them their livelihood. He kept his voice low. "You are not in trouble." She swallowed. "Only that everyone was nervous before you came down." Jabari was already asking questions. He kept saying, "Something is wrong, something is wrong," before anyone even knew. Musa's eyes narrowed. "Before anyone knew?" The cook nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I thought maybe you had told him already." "I had not." Silence stretched. The woman lowered her gaze again. "Forgive me if I've spoken out of place." Musa left without answering. Outside, the dawn sky hung grey over the city, the clouds still swollen from the night's rain. He got into a smaller vehicle from the garage one, without the polished presence that announced wealth from a distance. He drove himself this time. No driver, no escort, no witnesses. As he merged into the waking traffic, he hated how alive he felt. This was not business. It was not acquisition negotiation or damage control. It was raw, uncertain, almost humiliating. He had spent years ensuring he never had to enter situations without control. Now he was driving toward a woman he had publicly disgraced, following a trail made of suspicion, shame, and instincts he no longer trusted. The city changed as he drove. The roads narrowed. Towers gave way to concrete buildings with fading paint. Then came the mechanic stalls, fruit sellers, roadside fires, already smoking under blackened pots. School children in uniforms stepped over puddles. Motorbikes cut through traffic like impatient insects. Then farther still, where city planning seemed to fray into improvisation, the streets grew rougher and the houses smaller. He parked at a distance from Amara's neighborhood and waited. Mourning unfolded around him. Women swept dirt from doorways. A radio crackled with news and static. Someone argued loudly over the price of tomatoes. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere a preacher's voice floated through a cheap speaker, promising deliverance to anyone tired enough to believe him. Then he saw her. Amara stepped out through the rusted gate with a cloth bag hanging from one shoulder. She moved quickly, but not like someone sneaking. More like someone racing time. She wore the same faded sandals from yesterday. Her posture was straight despite visible exhaustion. Even from inside the car, Musa could see that she had slept very little. He waited a moment, then followed at a distance. Amara first stopped at a pharmacy little bigger than a kiosk. Musa stayed across the road, pretending to check his phone. He watched her count crumpled notes in her palm twice before handing them over. The pharmacist spoke to her with the practiced impatience of someone tired of customers who could not afford full treatment. After a short exchange, he removed one box from the counter and took another away. Half the medicine. Musa felt his jaw harden. Amara accepted the reduced packet without complaint. From there she walked to a market stall and bought tomatoes, onions, rice, and dried fish in such small quantities it was obvious every coin mattered. Then she paused at a fruit stand where bruised bananas were piled in a separate crate. Discount fruit. Fruit no one else wanted. She bought 2. Musa stayed behind a newspaper stand and watched the scene with a heaviness growing in his chest. This still did not prove innocence, he reminded himself. Need was not proof. Suffering was not proof. But it was destroying certainty. Amara continued down a muddy lane, and Musa followed on foot, now careful to keep people between them. Children ran past him, barefoot, laughing. A man pushing a wheelbarrow nearly clipped his shoulder and muttered an insult without recognizing who he was. Musa barely noticed. He was watching Amara turn through a narrow passage between 2 buildings patched with tin and plywood. At the end of it stood the same house. He stopped before reaching the gate and moved to the side where a cracked wall and an overgrown bush gave him some cover. Through the open window he could see part of the main room. Amara entered and immediately set down the bag. The old woman from last night sat on a low chair near the door, her eyes pale and unfocused. She turned her head at the sound of footsteps. "Amara." "I'm here, Auntie." Her voice changed inside that house. It lost the guarded politeness it always had in Musa's mansion. Here it became softer, warmer, tired but real. The old woman reached out blindly. "Did you get the medicine?" "Yes, enough." A pause. "For today," Amara said. Not enough, Musa thought. On the mattress in the corner, the boy began coughing again. It came in violent waves, bending his thin body forward until Amara rushed to him, lifting his shoulders, rubbing his back, murmuring comfort while trying not to sound afraid. "Easy, Tunda. Easy. Breathe slowly. Tunda." Now he had a name. The boy was perhaps 10. Maybe younger. Illness had a way of confusing age. His face was too sharp, his wrists too narrow. Sweat clung to his forehead. Amara opened the pharmacy packet, shook out tablets, frowned at the amount, then broke one in half. Musa felt a shock of anger, immediate and useless. Not at her, at the world, at himself, at the obscene distance between his daughter's room with its filtered air, imported toys, private doctors on call, and this room where a woman he had condemned was cutting medicine in half and praying it would be enough to hold a child together for one more day. Amara rose to prepare food. She rinsed rice in a dented bowl, stretched a pot of water, and scraped the last of a tin of cooking oil with her finger. She gave the boy one of the bananas, but pretended she had already eaten one herself. He looked at her with the suspicious intelligence of sick children who learn too soon how adults lie to protect them. "You didn't eat," he said weakly. "I did." "No." She smiled anyway. "Then you must eat for both of us." The old woman turned toward them. Did the hospital call Amara's hand stilled? "No. They said today." "I know. You should go back." "With what money, Auntie?" The question slipped out sharper than she intended. Regret crossed her face instantly. She softened her tone. "I'm sorry." The old woman bowed her head. "I would sell the house." Amara almost laughed. What house? It was not cruel. It was simply true. Then came the moment Musa would replay long after this day ended. Amara sat on the floor beside the mattress, elbows on her knees, and covered her face with both hands. Not dramatically, not for anyone to see. It was the posture of a person who had run out of strength privately and had nowhere safe to set it down. When she finally spoke, her voice was broken open. "I don't know what else to do." Musa stood completely still. Inside his mansion, when people said they had no options, it usually meant they disliked the available ones. Here in this room, the sentence meant something else. Here it meant the wall was real. Here it meant every decision cut someone. Here it meant dignity itself had become expensive. Then Tunda whispered, "Did they sack you?" Amara lowered her hands. Children, Musa realized, always knew more than adults hoped. She forced calm into her face. "Don't worry about that. Because of me? No. You're lying." She took his hand. "Listen to me. None of this is because of you." The boy stared at the ceiling for a second, then turned his face away and cried silently. That was when Musa froze. Not because of the poverty, not because of the sickness, not even because of the possibility that he had wronged her. He froze because in that instant he saw with brutal clarity what his accusation had actually done. He had not merely fired a nanny. He had cut the only stable income holding this fragile household together. He had thrown judgment like a stone, and it had landed here, in a room with half medicine, in a child's lungs, in an old woman's darkness, in a woman too proud to beg and too burdened to collapse. Musa stepped back slowly, his breath suddenly shallow. Then from farther down the lane he heard footsteps approaching, and a man's voice calling out. "Amara." She stiffened inside the house. Musa turned toward the sound. A tall man in a leather jacket was striding toward the gate, with the swagger of someone who enjoyed being feared. His face was hard, his smile wrong. One hand tapped against his thigh impatiently. Debt, Musa thought immediately. Trouble had arrived. And for the first time in years, Musa Okafor felt something stronger than pride. He felt dread. Amara stood up so quickly that the metal cup beside the mattress tipped over and rolled across the floor. The man at the gate did not wait to be invited in. He pushed it open with one hand and stepped into the yard, like he owned the dust beneath his shoes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the kind of cheap confidence that looked almost expensive from a distance. His leather jacket was cracked at the seams. His boots were muddy. A thin scar cut across his chin. He wore a smile that never reached his eyes. Musa remained hidden beyond the wall, every muscle tightening. Inside the house, Tunda shrank against the mattress. The blind old woman straightened, sensing danger without needing sight. Amara moved instinctively to place herself between the man and her family. "Kelechi," she said, voice low. "Not here." "Then where?" He spread his hands and looked around the room with mocking amusement. "You said that yesterday, and the day before." His gaze drifted over the house with deliberate cruelty. The cracked walls, the half-empty bowl on the floor, the old woman, the child. He enjoyed the humiliation. Musa could see that instantly. "I told you I need more time," Amara said. Kelechi laughed. Time does not pay interest." He stepped closer. Musa's jaw hardened. The old version of him would have walked away, called security, and solved this from a distance with money and instructions. But standing in the dirt outside that fragile house, he could feel the weight of a more shameful truth. This man was here because the little structure holding Amara's life together had collapsed, and Musa himself had kicked one of the supporting beams. Amara kept her voice controlled. My brother needs treatment, and I need my money. It was not a large loan, not to a rich man. His smile sharpened. To you it is everything. That line settled in Musa's chest like a stone. Everything. He looked through the window and saw Amara's fingers curl into her palms. Not from fear alone, from fury. The kind of fury that came when pain was true, and mockery arrived on top of it. I said I would pay you, she replied. Kelechi tilted his head. With what good intentions tears dignity? He leaned closer. Dignity has terrible resale value. Tunda coughed hard and the sound cut through the room. Kelechi glanced at the boy and clicked his tongue. Still alive, then? Amara's face changed. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just a slight shift around the mouth, a small stillness in the eyes. It was the look of a woman stepping to the edge of what she could tolerate. Leave, she said. He grinned. Or what Musa took one step forward from the wall before stopping himself. Not yet. He needed to understand. He needed to know whether this was tied to the theft, to the money, to the strange, quiet resignation with which Amara had accepted being cast out. Kelechi held out his hand. You have something for me today. Even a little. Amara reached into her bag. Musa's heart kicked once hard. She pulled out crumpled notes, the same kind of notes he had watched her count at the pharmacy, at the market, at the fruit stand. Money already stretched past reason. She pressed it into Kelechi's hand. He counted it. Slowly. Deliberately. Then his face darkened. This is an insult. It's what I have. You think I crossed half this city for this? He grabbed her wrist. Do not play with me. Tunda tried to rise. Leave her. The old woman turned her face toward the sound and began trembling. Please, she whispered. Please don't. Musa moved. He stepped through the gate so fast that even he did not fully register it until Kelechi turned and saw him. For one strange second, the whole yard froze. Kelechi looked Musa up and down, taking in the clean shirt, the watch, the posture of a man who had never had to ask permission to enter a place. His grip loosened on Amara's wrist. Amara stared too. Shock flared across her face, followed instantly by anger. Musa ignored both of them and fixed his eyes on Kelechi. Take your hand off her! The words came out colder than steel. Kelechi recovered first. Who are you, a man telling you once? Something in Musa's tone worked. Kelechi let go. Amara stepped back immediately, rubbing her wrist. Her pride reassembled itself at once, almost violently. Why are you here? Musa did not answer her. Not yet. Kelechi's expression shifted from aggression to calculation. If this is your business, then you know she owes money. How much? Amara turned sharply. No. Kelechi ignored her. He named a number. Inflated. Musa knew extortion when he heard it. That is not what I borrowed, Amara said. It is now. Musa took out his phone, not to transfer money, but to make a call. Kelechi's eyes narrowed. Who are you calling? The police, Musa said. It was a bluff, though only partly. He would call if needed. But he wanted to see the man's reaction. It worked. Kelechi took 2 steps back. This is a private arrangement. No, Musa replied. A private arrangement does not involve threatening a sick child in his own home. For the first time, uncertainty entered Kelechi's face. He had come expecting a desperate woman, not a witness with power. He pointed at Amara. This is not over. Then he turned and walked out, trying to preserve some shred of menace on the way. Only when the gate clanged shut did the tension in the room break. Tunda slumped back against the mattress. The old woman covered her face. Amara remained standing, breathing hard, her eyes fixed not on the gate but on Musa. Why, she asked. One word. No gratitude, no softness, just demand. Musa looked around the room. The dented pots, the fading cloth nailed over the broken window, the half packet of medicine, the weak daylight coming through the cracks in the roof. This house had no room for pretense. It stripped people too quickly. "He was hurting you," Musa said. Her chin lifted. "So now you protect me." I stopped him. "You humiliated me yesterday. Today you want credit for not letting a debt collector grab my arm." The words struck clean. Musa did not defend himself. He had no defense that would sound human in this room. The old woman spoke first, voice shaking. "Amara." "Who is this?" Amara did not take her eyes off Musa. "My former employer." The old woman's mouth parted slightly. Even Tundi, exhausted and feverish, seemed to straighten with recognition. Former employer. In that tiny space it sounded like accusation history and class divide all at once. Musa glanced at the boy. "He needs a doctor." Amara laughed bitterly. "And the sky is above us. Is there anything else you'd like to announce?" He absorbed that too. He had been challenged by board members, competitors, government officials, journalists. But there was something sharper about being challenged by someone he had once been able to dismiss with a sentence. Because she was right. He had entered this room with the habits of command still clinging to him, and command looked obscene here. "I followed you," he said. The honesty of it seemed to surprise even him. Amara's face went still. "I know." That caught him off guard. "You knew?" "Not at first. Then I noticed the same car, the same distance, the same man who thought he was being subtle." Musa almost looked away. "Almost. And you let me continue." "What difference would it make if I stopped?" she asked. "You had already judged me." Silence spread again, thick and difficult. Tunda's breathing rasped. The old woman slowly felt for the chair beside her and sat down. Musa glanced at the half-empty medicine packet. "He needs more than this." Amara folded her arms, not defensively, but to hold herself together. "Yes. I can help." "No." The answer came so fast it almost sounded rehearsed. Musa looked at her. "Your brother is sick. My brother was sick yesterday too. You did not care then." The sentence was not loud. That made it worse. He stepped farther into the room, then stopped when he saw Tunde watching him with a mixture of fear and accusation. Of course. To the boy, Musa was not a rescuer. He was the reason everything had become worse. That realization stripped away the last lazy excuse Musa's conscience had tried to offer him. He had told himself yesterday that if he was wrong, he could correct it later. Standing there now, he understood something brutal. Powerful people always imagined later would still be available, for the powerless later could kill. The old woman spoke again. "Sir, if you are the man who employed her, please know she is a good girl." Amara closed her eyes briefly, as if the words pained her. "She has looked after us since her sister died," the old woman continued. "She works, she comes home, she works again. She does not sleep enough. She does not eat enough. She thinks nobody sees, but God sees." Musa felt heat rise at the back of his neck. Amara interrupted softly. "Auntie, please." But the older woman kept going, perhaps because fear had exhausted her caution. She sold her mother's bracelets. She sold her own phone once. She walked to work for weeks to save transport money. If anything wrong happened, it was not because her heart is wrong. That line hung in the room. If anything wrong happened, it was not because her heart is wrong. Musa turned to Amara. What did she mean? Amara did not answer. He tried again. "What happened in my office?" "Nothing, only that guarded face. That terrible, disciplined silence." Musa's pulse slowed in that dangerous way it did, when his mind locked onto detail. "You were there," he said quietly. "You did touch the money." Amara's jaw tightened. There it was. Not confession, not denial, a fracture. The old woman looked between them, confused. Tunda tried to sit up higher. Musa took one careful step forward. I need the truth. Amara met his gaze, and what he saw in her eyes was not guilt in the simple form he had once imagined. It was shame, anger, pride, exhaustion, resentment, and beneath all of it, a choice. A choice not to explain herself to a man who had not thought she deserved explanation before. When she finally spoke, each word was measured. The truth is not always kind to people like you. Musa held her gaze. Try me. Her laugh this time had no bitterness in it, only sadness. No, she said. The truth is what broke this house, and if I tell it now, it may break yours too. Musa felt the room shift around that sentence, not because he fully understood it, but because for the first time he sensed the theft might not be a single act or a simple lie, or even a misunderstanding limited to one woman and one missing sum of money. It might be something larger, something already living inside his household, something with roots. And suddenly the open office door, Jabari's careful concern, the missing cash, Nia's silence, and Amara's refusal to defend herself, no longer looked like separate fragments. They looked like pieces of one hidden structure. Musa stared at Amara, and she stared back, worn out but unbowed. In that collapsing room, with medicine running out and truth circling closer, he realized something that made his stomach turn. He had come here looking for proof about a theft. What he was beginning to find was betrayal. And betrayal, once uncovered, rarely stayed in one place. Musa left Amara's house with the taste of dust and shame in his mouth. He drove back through the city without turning on the radio, without taking calls, without even noticing when traffic thickened near the bridge. Horns blared around him. Vendors moved between vehicles holding water-roasted corn phone chargers, cheap sunglasses. The sun had climbed high, heating the windshield, until the air inside the car felt close and punishing. Still, Musa barely registered any of it. His mind stayed inside that cramped room. The half-medicine packet. The boy named Tunde trying not to cough because coughing hurt. The old woman saying, if anything wrong happened, it was not because her heart is wrong. And Amara's final words, the truth is what broke this house, and if I tell it now, it may break yours too. By the time he reached the mansion gates, his patience was gone, and his certainty was worse than gone. It had rotted. What remained was a restless, dangerous clarity he had judged too quickly, and now the ground beneath his own household no longer felt solid. The guards at the entrance straightened the moment they saw his car. Musa did not slow. He drove straight to the main steps, got out, and strode inside with such force that the front hall seemed to shrink around him. Jabari appeared almost immediately. Of course he did. The house manager moved with the same polished efficiency he always had. Quiet shoes, measured posture concern arranged carefully across his face. He had worked for Musa for years. He knew the rhythms of the household better than anyone. He knew where every key was kept, which supplier could be trusted, how to manage staff turnover without drama, how to present problems only after already containing them. He also knew how to arrive quickly when something mattered. Sir Jabari said you missed your 10 o'clock call with Nairobi. Reschedule it. Jabari blinked once. Of course. Musa walked past him, then stopped and turned. Where is Nia? In her room, sir. Has she eaten a little fruit? Nothing more. Musa looked at him for a long second. Jabari held the gaze calmly. That calmness irritated him now. Too smooth, too controlled, like a man who had survived for years by staying just useful enough to avoid being questioned deeply. Musa took a step closer. The day the money went missing. Walk me through it again. If Jabari was surprised by the demand, he hid it well. "Yes, sir. You called for tea at 4:15. I went to the office wing shortly after and found the door slightly open. I thought that was unusual. Then I noticed Amara coming from that side of the corridor. She looked startled when she saw me. Later, when you checked the cash and discovered it missing, I informed you of what I had seen. Every sentence was clean, almost too clean." Musa watched his face. "You did not enter the office yourself?" "No, sir." "You never touched the desk, the drawer, the safe?" "No, sir." The answer came without delay, too quickly for Musa's liking. He said nothing else, just nodded once. Jabari shifted slightly. "Sir, has something happened?" That question. Again that careful tone. Not what happened. Not is Nia well. Not do you need anything. Just the soft opening of a net thrown wide enough to catch whatever Musa might reveal. Musa almost admired it. Almost. "No," he said. "Not yet." Then he turned and went upstairs. Nia's door was unlocked this time. He found her sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her bed, drawing with colored pencils. Or trying to. The page in front of her showed the outline of 3 people holding hands under a crooked yellow sun. One figure was small, one tall, the third wore a head wrap. But the drawing had been scratched over so hard in dark pencil lines that the middle of the page was nearly torn through. When Nia saw Musa, she stopped moving. He closed the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Musa said more quietly than usual, "Can I sit?" Nia looked suspicious. "You never ask that." "Then perhaps I should have." She did not answer, but she did not refuse. Musa lowered himself into the chair near her desk, feeling absurdly formal in his own daughter's room. He looked at the ruined drawing on the floor. "Did you make that?" She shrugged. "I spoiled it." "No," he said, after a pause. "I think something spoiled it before you did." Nia glanced up, startled. Musa inhaled slowly. This was harder than business, harder than negotiations, harder than any courtroom or hostile board meeting. He could buy loyalty, intimidate rivals, outlast public criticism. But sitting before a grieving child and asking for truth after failing her once already, there was no armor for that. "I need you to tell me everything you remember about that day," he said. Nia's face closed at once. "Why?" "Because I am no longer sure I understood it correctly." She stared at him. That alone was enough to wound him. His daughter was genuinely shocked that he could admit uncertainty. "I thought you said it was done," she whispered. "I was wrong to say that." The room went very still. Outside, a bird struck the window lightly and flew off. Somewhere down the hall, a cleaner's bucket wheels squeaked and faded. Nia's fingers tightened around the blue pencil in her hand. "Are you saying Amara didn't do it?" "I am saying I need facts, not assumptions." She lowered her eyes. "That's what I needed too." He accepted that without protest. "Tell me," he said. Nia was quiet for so long he thought she might refuse. Then she put the pencil down and pulled her knees up to her chest. "I couldn't sleep that day," she began. "It was raining. Not hard yet, but the sky was dark. Amara had gone downstairs because Auntie Saad called her to help with something in the kitchen. I was supposed to be doing my reading, but I came out because I wanted juice." Musa said nothing. He kept his face neutral, though his pulse had begun to climb. "I heard voices near your office wing." Nia continued, not loud, like when adults are trying not to be heard. "Whose voices?" She pressed her lips together. "I'm not sure." One of them sounded like Jabari. The other one, I think it was one of the security men. Maybe. I only heard a little. Musa leaned forward. "What did you hear Jabari said not here?" Then something like, "Later." Then I heard footsteps. She looked up at him carefully, measuring whether he believed her. He kept his gaze steady. "Go on." I hid behind the table near the flowers because I thought if grown-ups were whispering, maybe I wasn't meant to be there. A small child hiding because adults sounded dangerous. Musa felt his stomach tighten. "Then I saw Jabari come out of your office." His breathing slowed deliberately. "You're sure, yes? What was he doing?" "He had your grey hand towel, the one you keep near the glass cabinet because you don't like fingerprints." Musa's mind flashed instantly to the towel. He remembered it. Soft, imported, monogrammed. He also remembered Jabari mentioning fingerprints when the money disappeared, as if the very idea had occurred to him, naturally, too naturally. "What did he do with the towel?" Musa asked. Naya frowned, replaying the image. He was wiping his hand. Or maybe the doorknob. I couldn't tell. That was enough. Not proof in court, but enough to crack the shape of the lie. "Did he see you?" Her face changed. Fear entered it again. Not fresh fear, but remembered fear. "Yes." Musa felt heat rise behind his eyes. "What happened?" Nia swallowed. He smiled first. The normal smile. Then he asked what I was doing there. I said I wanted juice. He came closer and crouched down and told me your office was not a place for children. I said I didn't go inside. Her voice got smaller. Then he asked if I saw anything. "And what did you say?" I said I saw him come out. Musa's hands curled slowly against the chair arms. Nia looked down at her socks. Then his face changed. "How?" He stopped smiling. She hesitated. Not angry exactly. Worse. Musa knew the type. Quiet threat wore a different face than open anger. Children sensed it even when adults called them dramatic. "What did he tell you?" Musa asked. He said grown-up matters are delicate. He said if I told confusing stories, innocent people could get hurt. Her eyes filled. Then he said Amara was already in trouble. He said if I made things harder, you might think she was teaching me to lie. There it was. Musa shut his eyes briefly. Jabari had not merely hidden himself. He had weaponized a child's loyalty. He had known exactly where to apply pressure, not by threatening Nia directly, but by making her fear she would harm the one person she loved most in that house. "I wanted to tell you," Nia whispered. "I really did." Musa opened his eyes. "Why didn't you?" She looked at him then, and there was no cruelty in her expression, only devastating honesty. "Because when you get angry, nobody can talk." The sentence entered him like a blade. He did not move. He could not. She continued, voice trembling now. "You were already shouting before Amara even answered you." Jabari was standing there. The guards were there. Everybody was watching. "You had that look." She struggled for the words. The look like everything was already decided. And Amara kept looking at me like she was trying to tell me not to say anything. So I got scared. Musa heard rain from that day in his memory now. Heard his own voice, sharp and public, built to dominate a room rather than discover truth. He had thought he was being decisive, moral, strong. To his daughter he had looked unreachable. To Amara probably dangerous. "What look?" he asked quietly. Nia hugged herself tighter. "The same look you had after Mama died, when people tried to help and you hated them for seeing you hurt." He stared at her. Children, he thought with sudden grief, remembered everything. He rose from the chair and crossed to the window, because if he stayed facing her, his own composure might not survive. Below the estate grounds were immaculate. Gardeners trimmed edges. Water flashed in the fountain. A luxury car rolled through the side entrance. The machinery of wealth continued with beautiful indifference. Behind him, his daughter sat in a room full of toys she barely touched, carrying a fear she should never have had to carry. Musa spoke without turning. Nia, why do you think Amara didn't defend herself? He heard the fabric of the bed shift as she moved. Because she knew you wouldn't listen. He let the answer settle. Then she added even softer, and because she was protecting me. He turned around sharply. What do you mean? Nia wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Before you came downstairs, Amara saw me behind the flower table. Just for a second. She looked at me like this. Nia widened her eyes slightly, pleading without words, like she wanted me to stay quiet. Why would she do that? Maybe because she knew Jabari would blame me too. Or maybe because she knew you were too angry, and it would only get worse. Musa looked at the torn drawing on the floor again. 3 figures holding hands. Then darkness scratched through the middle. Did Amara ever say anything about Jabari before that day, he asked. Nia hesitated. Not exactly. Tell me anyway. She once said some people in this house smile more when you're around than when you're gone. That almost made him laugh, but there was no humor in it. Did she seem afraid of him? Nia thought carefully. Not afraid. Careful. Careful. Yes. That fit. Careful people learned early how power moved through a room, who could ruin them, who could frame a story first and make everyone else sound like excuses. Musa sat back down slowly, though he no longer felt like the same man who had entered this room minutes ago. He had come for memory. He had received indictment, not only of Jabari, of himself. Nia, he said, I need you to listen to me. She looked up warily. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have listened before I made accusations. I should never have forced you to stand in that room and watch me humiliate someone you trusted. Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time she did not look away. I am sorry. The words felt smaller than the damage. Still, they were the only honest ones available. Nia studied him as if she were deciding whether sorrow could be real inside a man like her father. Then she asked the question he had earned. What are you going to do? Now Musa looked toward the closed door, toward the corridor beyond it, toward the entire house below, where polished routines still operated under the hands of a man whose lies were beginning to show. His voice, when it came, was steady. Now he said, I find out how deep this betrayal goes. Musa did not confront Jabari immediately. That was what the old Musa would have done, storm downstairs, call everyone into the main hall, let rage lead, and trust that fear would force the truth into the open. But rage had already failed him once. Rage had humiliated an innocent woman, frightened his child into silence, and sent a fragile household to the edge of collapse. This time he wanted something sharper than anger. He wanted evidence. By late afternoon, the mansion had returned to its usual rhythm on the surface. Lunch trays were cleared. The gardener trimmed the hedges near the fountain. The cook argued quietly with a supplier on the service phone. Somewhere in the West Wing, a vacuum cleaner hummed and then stopped. To anyone watching from outside, Musa Okafor's estate looked like what it had always looked like, controlled, expensive, untouchable. Inside, Musa was dismantling it piece by piece. He locked himself in his office and shut the curtains halfway, leaving the room washed in muted daylight. The safe sat behind the painting on the far wall. The desk was polished. The leather chair remained where it had been the day he discovered the missing money. Everything appeared ordinary. That was the problem. Betrayal survived by hiding inside ordinary things. Musa began with the house accounts. Not the official monthly summaries Jabari usually prepared for review. Those were neat-filtered and too easy to shape. Musa wanted raw entries, petty cash requests, maintenance, reimbursements, staff advance payments, vendor settlements, emergency disbursements. He pulled the digital logs himself and began scrolling line by line. At first, nothing jumped out. Then a pattern emerged. Small amounts. Never large enough to trigger alarm. Never dramatic. A little extra attached to replacement cleaning supplies. A little added to fuel reimbursements. A duplicated maintenance fee on a week Musa had been traveling. Petty cash withdrawals marked urgent household need with no clear supporting receipts. Tiny leaks, quiet leaks, the kind no one noticed when money was abundant and trust was assumed. Musa's face hardened. It was clever, disgustingly clever. A large theft made noise. 100 small thefts dissolved into routine. He kept going. Some of the suspicious entries stretched back 8 months. Others were newer, more frequent in the last 10 weeks. Twice petty cash had been signed out under the authority of a security supervisor, who no longer worked there. Once an invoice for generator repair had been paid in full, even though the repair company's own digital record easily checked through Musa's vendor system showed a lower amount. He reached for his phone and called his private finance officer, Adaeze. She answered on the second ring. "Sir, I need a silent audit." A pause. Then her voice dropped. "How silent?" "No notifications, no emails to household management, no flags in the shared system. I want all petty cash movements, reimbursement claims, and vendor payments tied to residential operations from the last 12 months. Understood. Cross-check signatures, timestamps, bank recipients, and any duplicate invoices." Adaeze was quiet for half a second, processing the tone more than the request. "Should I assume internal fraud?" "Yes. Do you suspect someone specific?" "Yes." "Do you want a name in the report?" "No. I want facts. That will take some hours. I'll wait." He ended the call and leaned back, but only for a moment. Waiting did not mean inactivity. Next, he pulled security access logs. The house used discrete electronic records for office wing movement, though not every internal door required authorization during daytime hours. It was part of the luxury security without visible inconvenience. Jabari, as house manager, had broader access than most staff. So did Musa. So did 2 senior guards rotating shift oversight. On the day the money vanished, one detail surfaced almost immediately. Jabari's access token had registered near the office corridor 3 separate times within 40 minutes. That alone was not proof. Managing the household could require movement everywhere, but the timestamps were wrong. First entry 4:02 p.m., second entry 4:11 p.m., third entry 4:18 p.m. Musa stared at the screen. He had asked for tea at 4:15. Jabari's story had been that he walked by after Musa's request, and only then found the office area suspicious. But Jabari had already been there. Twice. Before the tea request. Before the discovery. Musa felt a pulse of cold satisfaction. Not joy. Nothing so simple. Just the dark steadiness that came when a lie finally began to bleed. He printed the log and set it aside. Then he checked the exterior security roster. The guard Nia had vaguely mentioned the one who might have been whispering near the corridor was named Solomon. He had indeed requested sudden leave the morning after the incident, citing a family emergency in Ibadan. The request had been approved by Jabari. Approved unusually fast. Musa's mouth thinned. He picked up the phone again, this time calling one of his corporate investigators, a former police intelligence officer named Bassi, who now handled discrete background matters too sensitive for public channels. When Bassi answered, Musa kept it brief. "I need you to locate a former residential security guard. Name Solomon Adebayo. Last address and phone should still be in estate employment records. What am I asking him?" "Nothing yet. First find out whether he actually traveled for a family emergency. And if he didn't, then find out who paid him not to stay." Bassi did not waste words. "I'll move." Musa ended the call and looked at the office around him. This room had once felt like command. Now it felt contaminated. He stood crossed to the cabinet where crystal decanters gleamed and poured water instead of whiskey. He drank it slowly and remembered Amara's house. Water boiled thinly over rice. Medicine split in half. A debt collector at the gate. His hand tightened around the glass. If Jabari had done this, and Musa was now past, if somewhere closer to how much then, Amara had not merely been blamed for one missing sum. She had been positioned, selected, sacrificed. Because she was poor, because she was lower in rank than every permanent senior staff member, because a wealthy man angered by missing cash would find it easier to believe in the greed of a nanny than the treachery of a trusted manager. The plan worked because it relied on Musa's worst instinct, and that humiliated him more than the theft itself. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. It was one of the junior administrative assistants from the corporate office, a careful young man named Chinedu, whom Musa sometimes used for errands requiring loyalty without imagination. Sir Chinedu said, stepping in the maintenance receipts you requested. Put them there. The assistant obeyed, then hesitated. Sir, Mr. Jabari asked if you would still like him to accompany you to the charity dinner tonight. Musa almost laughed. The nerve of it. Tell him I won't be attending. Yes, sir. And Chinedu. The young man stopped at the door. Sir, has Jabari said anything unusual today? Chinedu shifted. Not unusual, sir. Only that the house has been tense since the nanny left. Musa watched him closely. And he said these things happen when staff forget their place. The room chilled. Musa dismissed him with a nod, but after the door closed, he remained very still. Forget their place. Yes, that sounded like Jabari. Not merely theft, then, but contempt. The kind of contempt that dressed itself as order. The kind that believed poor people existed to absorb blame efficiently. Evening began to gather at the edges of the windows when Adayeze called back. I found enough, she said without preamble. How bad, for the last 12 months, suspicious outflows tied to residential operations totaled the equivalent of more than the original reported theft by a factor of 9. Musa said nothing. Adayeze continued precise, as always. Most transactions were split into small amounts, but the clustering is centered around approvals or handling chains involving Jabari. In 3 cases, bank reimbursements were directed to accounts linked to a cousin of his. In 2 others, duplicate vendor claims were processed after your signature was digitally attached from archived authorizations. Musa closed his eyes once. Digital misuse, too. Careful, patient, repeated. Can you prove intent? He asked. Yes, or close enough that any competent prosecutor would call it systematic fraud. Package everything. Do not send it to the shared office. Bring it to me personally, within the hour. When the call ended, Musa stood in silence and let the full structure settle into place. Jabari had not stolen under pressure or panic. He had built a method. He had siphoned quietly, repeatedly, professionally. And when risk appeared, when timing witnesses or loose ends made exposure possible, he had done the most efficient thing available, frame the least powerful person near the scene. Amara. Musa looked down at his desk and saw, as if from a great distance, the printed access logs, the copied invoices, the petty cash discrepancies. Evidence. Real evidence. The kind he should have demanded before speaking a single accusation aloud. Then another thought rose, ugly and immediate. Jabari had not acted entirely alone. Maybe Solomon had assisted. Maybe a vendor helped. Maybe someone else inside the house knew enough to stay useful and quiet. Betrayal like this rarely survived for months without at least one other hand steadying it. A knock came again near dusk. This time it was Nia. She stood in the doorway wearing the yellow sweater, still her hair now roughly tied back by herself, one side uneven. Musa noticed everything now that he had failed to notice before. "Are you busy?" she asked. "Yes," he said honestly. Then after a beat, "But not too busy for you." She stepped inside slowly, eyes moving over the papers spread across his desk. "Is this about Amara?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes." Nia nodded, as if that was the only answer she had hoped for. She came farther in and stood near the chair opposite him. "Are you going to shout at Jabari?" The question was so direct that it nearly undid him. "No, good." He raised an eyebrow. "Why good?" "Because people like him prepare for shouting." Musa stared at his daughter. Then, despite everything, a grim flicker of pride moved through him. She had seen more than he had, not just emotionally, strategically. "Who taught you that?" he asked. Nia shrugged. "Amara says loud people think they're winning when they're only making it easier for liars to hide." Musa looked at the papers again. "Yes." That sounded exactly right. He reached across the desk, gathered the main documents into a single stack, and aligned them with slow, deliberate care. No shouting, no impulsive accusation, no room left for denial. When he finally looked up, his voice was calm enough to frighten even himself. "Jabari has been stealing from this house for months," he said. "And tomorrow he's going to learn what happens when a man mistakes patience for blindness." Nia said nothing. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply looked relieved that at last her father had begun to see. And Musa, holding the evidence of betrayal in his hands, understood that exposing the thief would not be the true test. The true test would be what kind of man he chose to become after the truth was no longer deniable. The next morning, Musa did not go to the office. He cancelled 2 investor meetings, postponed a foundation board review, and ignored 3 calls from men wealthy enough to be offended by silence. None of it mattered. The real business of the day was inside his own house, inside the rotten space between trust and power, where a careful liar had hidden for months behind polished manners and obedient posture. By 9 o'clock, Adeyes had delivered the printed audit files in person. By 9:30, Bassi had called with news about Solomon. The guard had never gone to Ibadan. He had checked into a cheap guest house 40 minutes from the estate, using cash, stayed 2 nights, then quietly moved to his sister's apartment on the mainland. That alone might have been suspicious, but Bassi had gone further. A payment had reached Solomon 3 days after the theft, routed through a small business account belonging to Jabari's cousin. "Can Solomon be brought in?" Musa asked. "He's frightened," Bassi replied. "Frightened men are possible. Proud men are difficult. He is the first kind. Good. He says he didn't enter your office, only kept watch in the corridor once. He claims Jabari told him it was a private household matter and promised him money if he stayed quiet." Musa closed his eyes briefly. "And Amara. He says she was not part of it." That answer should have felt like relief. Instead, it landed like grief sharpened into confirmation. "Bring Solomon nowhere near the house yet," Musa said. "I may need him later. Keep him available." After the call, Musa stood by the window of his office and looked down at the circular driveway. Cars came and went beyond the gate. Gardeners trimmed roses near the east wall. In the kitchen wing, deliveries were checked and signed. The estate functioned with its usual elegance, but now he saw the machinery differently. Order had always impressed him. Today it accused him, because order, when left unquestioned, could become a stage on which injustice performed itself beautifully. A knock came. "Enter." It was Chinedu again, careful as ever. "Sir Jabari is asking whether you still want the inventory report before noon." "Yes," Musa said. "Tell him to bring it himself." Chinedu nodded and withdrew. Musa did not move at once. Instead, He looked across the desk to the folder Adaeze had delivered, then to the single folded note he had placed beside it, the address of Amara's house written in his own hand the previous day and carried in his wallet like a private confession. He made his decision. When Jabari arrived 10 minutes later, file in hand, Musa barely glanced up. "The report, sir." "Leave it." Jabari placed the folder on the desk. "Will there be anything else?" Musa leaned back. "Yes. I'll be out for some hours. No one is to enter my office." "Of course." "And Jabari?" "Yes, sir. Stay available. I may need you later." "Certainly." There was nothing in Jabari's voice. No alarm. No crack. That composure would once have reassured Musa. Now it only confirmed how practiced the man had become. After Jabari left, Musa waited 5 full minutes, then exited through the side corridor, got into the smaller vehicle again, and drove toward the far edge of the city. He was not going to confront Amara with evidence first. He was going to confront her with humility. The road to her neighborhood seemed shorter this time, though perhaps that was only because he no longer drove with the certainty of accusation. He parked near the corner and walked the remaining distance beneath a sky thick with heat and threatening rain. Children played football with a taped-up ball in the dirt lane. A woman frying a kara looked at him once, judged his clothes too fine for the area, and looked away. The smell of diesel pepper mud and cooking oil pressed close in the air. When he reached Amara's gate, it was half open. He knocked anyway. No answer. He stepped inside and found her seated on a low stool in the yard, washing clothes in a plastic basin. Her sleeves were rolled up. Soap ran over her wrists in cloudy streams. Tunda was asleep inside, visible through the doorway, and the old auntie sat nearby, shelling beans by touch more than sight. Amara looked up once saw him and immediately rose. Her face did not show surprise this time, only exhaustion. "You should not be here," she said. Musa glanced at the old woman, then back at Amara. "May we talk?" "You have already done enough talking for both of us." He accepted the blow. "Please." Amara set the wet cloth back into the basin. "Auntie, take the beans inside." The older woman hesitated, sensing tension, but obeyed. When they were alone in the yard, Amara folded her arms and waited. Musa did not begin with defense. "I was wrong." She said nothing. "I was wrong to accuse you publicly, wrong to decide before I had facts, wrong to treat your silence as proof of guilt." Still nothing. But he noticed one small change. Her shoulders, rigid a moment ago, loosened by a fraction. Not forgiveness, only acknowledgement that he had at last named the crime correctly. He continued, "Jabari has been stealing from my house for months." Her expression remained controlled, yet he saw the flicker. Pain first, then vindication, then something like anger returning, because vindication could not erase damage. "So now you know," she said quietly. "I know part of it, not all." "What part do you want?" "The part you refused to tell me." She gave a sad, disbelieving smile. "You think truth appears just because you ask more politely the second time?" "No," Musa said. "I think I no longer deserve it. But I am asking anyway." The words hung between them. Amara looked away first. She stared down the lane where a bicycle rattled past, and someone shouted prices at a roadside stall. "You should leave," she said. "If Jabari learns you came here again." "He already knows I'm suspicious." That drew her eyes back to him. "Then you're late." A muscle tightened in Musa's jaw. Late for what? For understanding how men like him survive. She turned, took the basin, and carried it to the water drum. Musa followed only with his eyes. "He steals in small ways," she went on. "Not because he is patient, because he is vain. He likes proving he can move around rich people and take from under their noses. You knew I knew he was wrong. I did not know how much. Why didn't you come to me?" At that, she laughed, not bitterly this time, but with deep weariness. "Come to you," she repeated. With what a feeling, a suspicion. A poor woman's word against the trusted manager of a billionaire's house. Musa had no answer. Amara set the basin down and faced him again. "Do you know what happens to women like me when we accuse men like him? We are called jealous, emotional, manipulative, ungrateful, and if we are poor, that is even better. People say poverty makes you imaginative." The sentence cut with surgical precision because it was true beyond her own case. He looked at her hands raw now from soap work and strain. The hands that had soothed Nia through nightmares. The hands he had watched split medicine in half. "Tell me about that day," he said. Amara closed her eyes briefly, as if the memory itself had weight. "When I went upstairs with the laundry list, I saw Jabari leaving your office wing. He moved too quickly. He smiled too easily. That is always how I know something is wrong with men like him. They become extra polite." She paused. "I went into the office because the door was open. Your safe compartment behind the painting was not fully shut. I knew it should not be open, but I also knew if I touched anything and was seen, it could become my problem. So I turned to leave." Musa listened without interrupting. "Then I saw money near the edge of the desk. Not a stack. A loose bundle. And on top of it," her throat moved once, "a folded note. Not to you, to me." Musa felt cold spread under his skin. "What note?" She looked him directly in the eye. It said, "Take it if you need it. Silence feeds everyone." For a moment, even the sounds of the lane seemed to disappear. Musa's voice lowered. "Jabari left that." "Yes. What did you do?" "I picked it up." Then I heard footsteps. Who's yours, someone else's I did not know. I panicked. That word from her mouth hurt more than if she had cried. Amara did not seem like a woman who gave panic much space. If she used that word, she meant it. I thought if anyone saw the note and the money in my hand, it would look exactly the way he wanted. "So you hid it?" "Yes." Musa stared at her. "In my pocket," she said. "Only for a moment. I intended to take it straight to the kitchen, find a way to leave it where someone else would see it first, somewhere public, somewhere safer than your office." But before I could think, Jabari came out, looked at me, and I knew. I knew he had set the whole thing. Musa remembered the corridor camera. Amara leaving, Jabari appearing. Concern already prepared. "What happened to the money?" he asked. Amara walked to the doorway, reached up to the top of a shelf, and took down a small metal tin. She opened it and pulled out a folded paper wrapped around several notes, then handed it to him. Musa unfolded it. The same brief message. Different handwriting than Jabari normally used for inventories, but likely disguised. Under it a sum smaller than what Musa had reported missing. "This is not all of it," he said. "I know, because he never meant me to take all of it. Only enough that if I was searched, found, or seen on camera, it would tie me to the crime. The rest would already be gone." Musa's hand tightened around the note. "Then why didn't you show me this?" Amara's face changed, not into rage, into something worse. Pain disciplined into dignity. "Because by the time you accused me," she said, "it was no longer about truth." He felt the words before he understood them. "You called me a thief in front of staff, in front of your child, in front of guards. You did not ask a question. You announced a verdict. If I had pulled out that money and note, then what would happen? Jabari would deny it. You would say I invented it. Everyone would watch. And She swallowed once. I would have to stand there begging to be believed by a man who had already decided I was small enough to break. Musa looked down. There it was. Not just the trap Jabari set. The second trap Musa completed with his own pride. Amara's voice softened, but only slightly. There is something else. He lifted his eyes. The loan from Kalechi. Jabari knew about it. Musa went still. He overheard me on a call weeks ago when the hospital first asked for money for Tunde's tests. After that, he started speaking differently to me. Not openly. Just enough to make me understand that he knew I was desperate. Her mouth tightened. He once told me desperation makes honest people convenient. Musa felt a flare of pure hatred then. Not the loud kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that grew quiet because it had found its target. So when you saw the money and note, he said slowly, you knew he wanted your desperation to finish the story for him. Yes. And you still kept silent. At that, Amara's composure finally cracked. Only slightly. Only around the eyes. You think silence was bravery, she asked. It was shame. The honesty of it hit him with force. I had borrowed from the wrong man. My brother was getting worse. I was tired. I was angry. And when you accused me, a part of me thought maybe this is what happens. Maybe if the world keeps looking at you like a thief long enough, even your innocence starts sounding weak in your own head. Musa had no right to feel wounded by that, yet he did. Because his accusation had not simply endangered her circumstances, it had entered her sense of self. He took a step closer. Amara. She stepped back immediately. The movement was small, but it said everything. Do not come closer just because you understand now. Do not claim intimacy through regret. Musa stopped. Then he did the only honest thing left. He bowed his head. Not theatrically, not deeply, just enough for a man like him to feel the full weight of lowering it. I cannot undo what I did, he said. But Jabari will answer for it. Publicly. Completely. Amara looked at him for a long time. Then she asked, and what about you? The question landed harder than any accusation. Because she was right again. Jabari's guilt did not erase Musa's. What do you want from me? He asked. Her answer came without hesitation. I want you to stop thinking justice is finished when the right poor person is no longer blamed. The lane behind them hummed with ordinary life. Pots clanged. A radio played a love song badly. Somewhere someone laughed. And in that narrow yard, Musa understood that exposing Jabari would only be the first part of truth. The second part would be far more difficult. He would have to stand before his own house and admit not only that he had trusted the wrong man, but that he had been the wrong kind of man to trust. By the time Musa returned to the mansion, the sky had darkened again. Heavy clouds pressed low over the estate, swallowing the late afternoon light and turning the glass walls of the house into mirrors of storm. The fountain in the circular drive still poured with polished elegance. The hedges were still trimmed. The guards still stood straight at the gate. Nothing on the surface suggested that, within the hour, the entire balance of power inside the house would shift. Musa stepped out of the car with Amara's words still burning in his mind. I want you to stop thinking justice is finished when the right poor person is no longer blamed. That sentence had followed him all the way home. He did not go to his office first. He went to the main hall and called for every senior household staff member, both shift supervisors, the family lawyer, Adayeze, and Jabari. Then, after a brief hesitation, he sent one more instruction. Bring Nia down if she wants to come. No one forces her. The message moved through the house quickly. Staff began appearing in ones and twos, trying to look calm and failing. Fear had a smell in wealthy houses. It smelled cleaner than in poorer places, but it was still fear. It moved through polished corridors behind composed faces under formal clothes. Within 20 minutes, the main sitting room was full. The chandeliers glowed overhead. Rain tapped against the high windows. The room designed for elegant entertaining now felt like a courtroom. Jabari stood near the fireplace with his usual posture, hands respectfully clasped, chin-level eyes attentive but not intrusive. If Musa had not known what he knew, he might still have admired the performance. Adazi sat at the long console table with a leather folder in front of her. The family lawyer, Mr. Dyke, stood nearby, expression unreadable. 2 guards from the current shift waited by the doorway. Chica from laundry, Auntie Sade from the kitchen, and several other long-serving employees stood in a tense semicircle. Nia came in last and quietly took a seat on the edge of the staircase, not hidden but not central either. Musa took his position at the center of the room. No raised voice, no theatrics, just control. "I called all of you here," he began, "because a wrong was done in this house." No one moved. Jabari lowered his eyes respectfully, as though preparing to hear a speech about staff discipline. Musa continued, "Some days ago, money went missing from my office. In response, I accused Amara publicly and dismissed her from my employment." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. No one spoke. I was wrong. This time the silence changed shape. Staff looked up. A few blinked in disbelief. Auntie Sade pressed her lips together. One of the younger cleaners looked briefly at Jabari, then away again. Musa let the admission stand there without softening it. I made a judgment before I had facts. I allowed assumption status and anger to do the work that truth should have done. That was my failure. Jabari lifted his head slightly. Musa saw the calculation begin behind his eyes. Not fear yet. Assessment. Good, let him calculate. Musa turned toward Adayeze. "Show them." She opened the folder and distributed copies to the lawyer and the guards. First, then kept the master set in her hands. In the past 12 months, she said, voice crisp and professional. Multiple residential financial irregularities have been identified. These include petty cash discrepancies, inflated reimbursements, duplicate vendor settlements, and unauthorized routing of household-related funds. Jabari's expression shifted by 1 degree. Barely visible. "Enough for Musa," Mr. Dyke added calmly. "The pattern indicates systematic internal fraud rather than isolated error." One of the cooks gasped quietly. Jabari finally spoke. "Sir, with respect, there must be some misunderstanding. Household accounting is complex. Minor inconsistencies happen." Musa looked at him. "Yes, minor inconsistencies do happen. Months of coordinated theft do not." Now the room truly tightened. Jabari spread his hands slightly. "If you believe money has been mishandled, I will cooperate fully. But I fail to see how you are connected," Musa asked. Jabari met his gaze. "Yes, sir." Musa nodded once, then picked up the first document from the table. "Your access token was logged near my office corridor at 4:02 p.m., 4:11 p.m., and 4:18 p. on the day the money was reported missing." Jabari answered immediately. "That proves nothing. I manage the house. I move everywhere." "Yes," Musa said. "And yet your version of events was that you only passed through after my tea request at 4:15. For the first time, Jabari paused before replying. "A memory error," he said smoothly. That day was tense. Musa set the paper down and lifted another. 3 irregular reimbursements were routed through an account linked to your cousin. That account belongs to a supplier contact, not me." Adayeze spoke before Musa could. "The supplier denies ownership. The account is traceable to your cousin's registered business." A low murmur rose among the staff. Jabari turned toward Adeyeze with polite disdain. With respect, corporate finance does not understand the informal structures households often use. Musa cut in. Enough! The word snapped across the room. Not shouted. Worse. Jabari fell silent. Musa picked up the next document. A former security guard, Solomon Adebayo, received a cash-linked transfer 3 days after the theft. That transfer was tied to your cousin's account. Jabari's face remained composed, but the skin around his mouth had gone tight. Solomon has also confirmed Musa said that he was instructed to remain silent about unusual movement near my office corridor. One of the current guards shifted his weight uneasily, another stared directly at the floor. Jabari breathed in slowly. A dismissed guard trying to save himself is not credible. Perhaps not alone. Musa replied. Which is why he is not alone. He turned his head toward Nia. The room followed his gaze. Jabari did not move at first. Then, very slightly, he did. That was the first true sign of fear. Musa spoke carefully. My daughter witnessed you leaving my office. She saw you with the hand towel from inside the room. She also heard you instructing someone in the corridor before the theft was discovered. Nia did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence alone was enough. Jabari's voice dropped lower. Sir, children are impressionable. Musa's stare hardened. Children also remember who frightens them. The words struck like glass breaking. Jabari recovered quickly, but not fully. If the child was confused. She was not confused, Musa said. She was intimidated. That landed. Auntie Sadeh drew in breath sharply. Chika crossed herself under her breath. One of the younger staff members looked at Jabari with open shock, now no longer hiding it. Jabari sensed the room changing and made his move. It was clever Musa had to give him that. He shifted away from denial into counterattack. Sir Jabari said quietly with respect, I think grief and guilt may be clouding judgment. You dismissed Amara. Now you regret it. Naturally, you want someone else to carry the blame. But regret does not create evidence. Musa almost admired the cruelty of it. Almost. Jabari had chosen the one argument that might once have worked, make Musa's remorse look emotional, unstable, irrational. Turn conscience into weakness. Turn correction into embarrassment. But Musa was no longer standing where he had stood before. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the note Amara had given him. Do you recognize this handwriting? Jabari's eyes flicked to the paper. Fast. Too fast. He answered no. Musa read aloud, Take it if you need it. Silence feeds everyone. The room seemed to inhale. This note, Musa said, was found wrapped around part of the money, left where Amara would discover it. Jabari went perfectly still. Not confused stillness, cornered stillness. You placed money where she could be tied to the theft? Musa continued. Not the full amount. Only enough to connect her to it if anyone saw her. The rest was already gone. No, Jabari said at once. That is a lie. Musa stepped closer. It is also consistent with every other fact in this room. Jabari's mask cracked, then not entirely, but enough for everyone to see something uglier underneath. You're taking the word of a desperate woman from the slums over years of loyal service, he asked. There it was. No more polished neutrality, no more servant's grace, just contempt. Raw, naked, damning. The words hit the room like a slap. Auntie Sadeh straightened with offended fury. Chika muttered, God is watching. One of the guards finally looked up, face tightened in shame. Musa's voice became quieter still. This, he said, is why you thought you would succeed. Jabari opened his mouth, but Musa did not let him speak. You believed poverty would do half your work for you. You believed if the accused person was low enough in rank, brown enough, with dust, tired enough, burdened enough, no one would ask deeper questions. You believed my anger would protect you. He took one more step, and it almost did. Those last 3 words struck harder than all the rest because they carried confession. Not only of Jabari's scheme, of Musa's role in it. The room felt different now, less like a hearing, more like revelation. Jabari looked around and saw it too, saw that the staff no longer watched Musa for cues. They watched him, measured him, reconsidered old incidents, old remarks, old humiliations they had once dismissed as mere strictness. His shoulders stiffened. Then, in a final desperate turn, he pointed at Nia. "She's a child. She shouldn't even be here." "No," Musa said, cutting through him. "You should never have made her part of this." The force of that sentence silenced everything. Rain began falling harder against the windows. Jabari's breathing had changed now, faster, less even. He looked toward the door as if calculating distance. One of the guards noticed and subtly straightened. Mr. Dyke spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Mr. Jabari, you are advised to say nothing further unless you intend to correct the record truthfully." Jabari looked at him with hatred. Then he laughed once. A dry, broken sound. "You all want a confession?" he asked. "Fine." No one moved. He looked at Musa, and now the contempt was complete. "You were easy," he said. The staff stared. Jabari went on, voice shaking, not with guilt, but resentment. "You rich men always think trust is loyalty because you pay for it. You think a neat file, a bowed head, and clean shoes mean character, but it's your pride that makes the theft possible, not our hands. Your pride." Musa did not flinch. Jabari pointed toward the papers. "Yes, I took money. Small amounts first, then more." "Why not?" "You would not notice. Men like you never notice until something touches your ego." His gaze swung toward the staircase where Naya sat frozen. And the girl. She saw too much. The nanny saw enough, so I used what was already there. Desperation, debt, need. Those are not inventions. They were useful. A stunned silence followed. He had admitted it, openly, not with remorse, with arrogance. That somehow made it worse. Musa felt something inside him settle, not relief exactly, but decision hardened into action. He turned to the guards. "Take him." Jabari laughed again, louder this time. "Now you act righteous." The guards moved toward him. Musa's answer came without heat. "No," he said. "Now I act late." That line ended whatever remained. The guards took Jabari by the arms. He struggled only once, then stopped when he realized resistance would only humiliate him further. As they led him toward the door, he twisted back toward Musa. "She touched the money too," he spat. "Don't pretend she was clean." Musa held his gaze. "I know," he said. "And unlike you, she had reasons to be ashamed." Jabari's face drained of color. Then he was gone. The room remained frozen for several seconds after the doors shut behind him. No one seemed to know how to breathe normally again. At last, Musa turned not to the staff first, but to Nia. "I am sorry you had to see any of this," he said. Nia's eyes were wet but steady. I already saw it before she whispered. Today was just the truth. That sentence settled over the room like final judgment. Musa then faced the staff. "Amara will receive a public apology from this household," he said. "In words, not whispers. Her wages and damages will be repaid in full. Any employee who was threatened, manipulated, or silenced may speak now or later without fear of dismissal." No one answered immediately. Some looked ashamed. Some relieved. Some furious that silence had cost so much. The storm outside broke fully, then rain striking the windows in silver sheets. And standing in the center of the room with the lie exposed and the house listening, Musa understood that justice had begun, but it had not yet reached the deepest wound. That wound still had a name. and it was his own. The house was quieter after Jabari was taken away. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a church becomes quiet after a confession too large for ordinary comfort. The staff moved more softly than before, not because they feared Musa's temper now, but because truth had passed through the rooms and left everything changed. Even the chandeliers seemed colder. Even the polished floors looked less like luxury and more like surfaces that had witnessed too much. Musa stood alone in his office long after everyone else had dispersed. Jabari's confession still echoed in his ears. "You were easy." The words should have enraged him. Instead, they shamed him because they were true. Jabari had stolen the money. Jabari had manipulated the staff. Jabari had used Amara's desperation as bait. But the trap had only worked because Musa's own mind had completed it. His power had done the rest. He looked at the safe behind the painting and felt nothing but disgust. A safe was meant to protect what mattered. But what Musa had failed to protect was not cash. It was dignity, trust, a woman's name, a child's sense of safety. He pressed both hands against the desk and lowered his head. For years he had told himself a story about survival. After his wife died, he hardened because softness felt like collapse. He controlled because control looked safer than grief. He measured people by competence because competence did not leave him. He trusted systems, routines, performance, obedience. Those things stayed still. Human beings did not. Now he could see what that hardness had become. Not strength. Distance. The kind that let a man miss the suffering of the people closest to him until disaster dragged it into the light. A knock came at the door. Adeze stepped in. "The police have him," she said quietly. "Mr. Dyke is handling the formal complaint." Musa nodded. She remained where she was, reading the room with the intuition of someone intelligent enough to know when reports were not the only thing being managed. "There's more," she added. "Several staff members have already come forward. Small incidents, missing vouchers, strange instructions. One says Jabari often warned them not to bring village stories to you." Musa gave a bitter half-smile. Village stories. Adayeze's expression tightened. He understood the hierarchy. So did I. She did not deny it. That strangely was a kindness. "Will you bring Amara back?" Adayeze asked. Musa looked out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. "I don't know if that is mine to decide." Adayeze accepted that too. "Then decide only what is yours." After she left, Musa stayed another few minutes, then picked up his keys and the envelope he had already prepared. Not merely cash, not merely apology. Inside were medical referral papers, access letters to a private pediatric specialist, emergency housing support documents, and a bank draft large enough to stabilize Amara's family for months. He hated how inadequate it all still felt, because money could repair circumstances faster than it repaired humiliation. By the time he reached Amara's neighborhood, the rain had softened into a fine mist. The dirt lane was slick and dark. Water gathered in shallow potholes reflecting bits of grey sky and hanging electric wires. A goat pulled against a rope near a leaning fence. Somewhere nearby, oil crackled in a pan. Somewhere else, a radio announcer read the evening headlines in a brisk, indifferent voice. Musa stopped outside the gate and did not go in at once. He had entered too many spaces, assuming the right to be there. Tonight he waited. Amara appeared after a moment, stepping into the yard doorway with a shawl around her shoulders. She saw him and did not smile, but she did not tell him to leave. That for now was enough. "May I come in?" he asked. Amara studied him for a second, then opened the gate wider without speaking. Inside, Tunda was awake but lying down, his face still pale, his breathing still too shallow for a child. The old auntie was mending something by hand near the lamp. Musa greeted them both respectfully before turning back to Amara. It's done, he said. She held his gaze. Jabari. In police custody, her expression barely changed. Not because she did not care, because she had learned not to celebrate justice too early. And the house, she asked. They know. All of them. The staff, the lawyer. Nia was there. At Naya's name, something softer flickered across her face and disappeared. Musa reached slowly into his coat and placed the envelope on the small table between them. Amara did not touch it. What is that? Not payment for silence, he said. Not charity. Medical care for Tunda. A bank draft to cover what my actions cost your household. Documents for immediate treatment. Housing support if you choose it. Her mouth tightened slightly. If I choose it. Yes. He meant it. He had learned at least that much. Amara glanced at the envelope, then away. You think money closes this? No. He answered too quickly, then corrected himself. I know it does not. Silence settled. The old auntie stopped mending and rose carefully. I will check the pot, she murmured, though there was no urgency in her voice. It was a graceful retreat, an older woman sensing that some conversations needed room more than witness. Tunda looked between Musa and Amara with tired suspicion, then turned his face to the wall, exhausted by adult sorrow. Now they were almost alone. Musa spoke carefully. I also came to apologize. Properly. Amara folded her arms. He continued. I wronged you twice. First, when I accused you without truth. Second, when I accused you in front of others and stripped away your dignity to protect my own certainty. She said nothing, so he forced himself to go further. I used your position against you, your poverty against you, your silence against you. I told myself I was acting on evidence, but in truth I acted on bias dressed as authority. That got her attention. Her eyes sharpened not with forgiveness, but with recognition that at last he was naming the right wound. Musa took a breath and let the next words come without defense. I am ashamed of the man I was in that room. Amara looked at him for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was low. You still are that man. He took the blow without flinching. Yes, he said. Parts of me still are. That answer seemed to disarm her more than any polished speech could have. Rain ticked softly on the roof. A pot lid shifted somewhere behind the curtain separating the cooking area. Amara moved to the chair by the wall and sat slowly as if the day had finally reached her bones. Do you know what hurt most? She asked. Musa remained standing. Tell me. It wasn't losing the job. He nodded once. It wasn't even the fear about Tunde. Her fingers locked together in her lap. Fear becomes ordinary when you live like this. You learn to breathe around it. Musa listened. What broke me, she said, was that Nia saw it. Her voice roughened on the child's name. She looked at me like the world had shifted under her feet. Not because money was missing, because you were speaking. And when powerful people speak like that, children think the truth must be standing with them. Musa closed his eyes briefly. Amara continued more softly now. I could survive being poor. I could survive hunger, transport, hospital queues, debt collectors' shame. But watching that little girl learn that love can be overruled by status in one afternoon. She shook her head. That is what I couldn't forgive. He felt the truth of it settle into him with terrible precision. This is not about whether you will take the envelope, he said quietly. It is about whether anything I do now can teach her something different than what I taught her that day. Amara looked up. For the first time since he arrived, the anger in her face loosened enough to reveal exhaustion beneath it. Real exhaustion. Not dramatic, not performative. The exhaustion of a person who had been strong for too long because weakness was not practical. "She misses you," Musa said. Amara's eyes flickered. "She kept your scarf." That landed. Her composure bent at the edges. Musa added, "She told the truth even after he frightened her." A long silence followed. Then Amara asked, "Did you apologize to her?" "Yes." And she listened. Amara gave a faint, sad breath that was almost a laugh. "That child has more grace than both of us." Musa nearly smiled. Nearly. He took the chair opposite her, but only after waiting long enough to see whether she objected. She did not. "I am not asking you to come back as if nothing happened," he said. "I would not insult you that way." "Good. I am asking what repair looks like to you." That question changed the air, because it handed something back. Choice. Amara stared at the envelope for several seconds before finally picking it up. She did not open it yet. She only held it in both hands, weighing not the contents but the meaning. "When poor people are harmed," she said, "repair always comes dressed like generosity." "That is the part I hate." Musa nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," she said. "You are beginning to." "Fair enough." She placed the envelope on her lap. "If I take this, it is for Tunda. Not because your guilt purchased my silence. It won't. If I accept help, it does not restore my trust." "I know. If I ever set foot in your house again, it will not be as a woman grateful to be allowed back in." He met her eyes. Then it must be as someone honored to return on her own terms. That was the first thing he had said all evening that she did not immediately resist. A small crack. Nothing more, but real. The old auntie returned then, carrying 3 chipped cups of tea on a tray, too thin for its burden. She placed one before Musa with grave courtesy, another before Amara, one for herself. The gesture was almost ceremonial. "You may have power elsewhere," it seemed to say. "Here you receive what is offered." Musa accepted the cup with both hands. The old woman sat and looked at him with cloudy eyes that somehow still felt piercing. "Young man," she said, "some apologies are not proved by words." He bowed his head. "I know. Good. Then prove yours by what grows after this." The room fell quiet again. Musa drank the tea. It was too hot and slightly bitter, perfectly human. Across from him, Amara sat with the envelope in her lap and the weight of too many losses in her eyes. She was not ready to forgive him. He had not earned that. But when Tunda coughed weakly from the mattress, she reached for the envelope at once. Instinct before pride. Need before symbolism. Musa looked away to give her back that privacy. And in that moment he understood that justice had never been the end of the story. It was only the first door. The harder work was what came after exposure, when the guilty were named, but the wounded still had to decide whether healing was worth the risk. 3 weeks later, the mansion no longer sounded the same. It was still grand, still polished, still guarded by tall gates and cameras and men in pressed uniforms. But the silence inside it had changed. It no longer carried the brittle tension of a place run on fear and habit. It carried something slower now. Uneven. Human. A house relearning itself. The first sign was small. One morning a tray crashed in the kitchen and no one flinched, as if thunder had struck. Auntie Sade scolded the boy who dropped it, but only for carelessness, not with that old panic that used to spread whenever staff feared being heard by the master of the house. Laughter, once rationed in careful doses, began to return in pieces, not freely, not yet, but enough to prove that a room could survive noise. The second sign was Naya. She was still cautious, still too watchful for a child her age. But she had started eating again. She let the hairdresser braid her hair without tears. She spent less time behind locked doors. Most of all, she had begun speaking to her father in full sentences instead of one-word replies sharpened by grief. Not because trust had been restored, because Musa was finally learning how to earn it. He no longer barked instructions from doorways and vanished into phone calls. He sat with her during breakfast, even when silence made him uncomfortable. He walked with her in the garden after sunset, instead of sending staff in his place. He listened when she spoke about small things, a bird's nest near the east wall, a classmate who cheated during a school game, the fact that rain smelled different from the upstairs balcony than it did from ground level. Small things Musa discovered were where children tested whether love was real. And so he stayed for them. That morning he found Nia in the reading room, curled into the same wide chair where Amara once read stories aloud. A book lay open on her lap, but she was not reading it. She was looking toward the window instead, watching clouds drift over the city. "You're thinking loudly," Musa said from the doorway. Nia looked over. "Can people do that?" "Yes," he replied, "especially in this house." A faint smile touched her face. "Progress." He stepped inside and held up an envelope. "There's something I want you to see." Nia eyed it warily. "What is it?" "A proposal. Or maybe an apology disguised as a project." That drew a clearer smile from her. She slid off the chair and came to sit across from him at the low table. Musa placed the papers down between them and opened the top sheet. At the head of the page was a new name: the Amara Foundation for Children and Caregivers. Nia blinked. Musa watched her carefully. "The trust lawyers finalized the structure yesterday. Funding is secured. Pediatric emergency grants, support for caregivers raising sick children or orphaned relatives, legal aid for domestic workers falsely accused or unfairly dismissed, housing transition help, education support." Nia ran her finger slowly over the letters in the title. "You named it after her?" "Yes." "Did you ask her?" "Yes." Nia looked up at once, and Musa sat back. She did not answer immediately. "That sounds like her." He almost laughed. "It does." In truth, Amara had taken 4 full days before responding. Not with sentiment, not with gratitude, with conditions. No symbolic charity that made rich people feel noble while poor families remained unheard. No smiling photographs that turned other people's suffering into branding. No board of wealthy strangers who thought compassion was a tax deduction. If her name was to stand on anything, it had to mean the work would be real. Musa had agreed to every condition, not because he was generous, because she was right. Nia kept reading. Will she work with it if she chooses? Did she? Musa looked out the window for a second before answering. She said she would help build it, but not as an employee beneath me. Nia nodded once, satisfied. Good. Again he almost smiled. The child had become a ruthless guardian of dignity. He respected her for it. By midday, Musa drove to Amara's neighborhood again. This time he was not alone. Nia sat beside him in the car, dressed simply, hands folded too tightly in her lap. Musa had asked whether she wanted to come, and after a long silence, she had said yes. Not eager, not light-hearted, but yes. The road out of the wealthy district and into the poorer neighborhoods still unsettled Musa, though for different reasons now. Once he had looked at such places as zones of hardship best understood through numbers donations, headlines, and speeches. Now every turn felt personal. He knew one rusted gate there, one cracked house, one thin child, one proud woman whose life he had nearly shattered because he found it easier to trust hierarchy than truth. When they reached the house, Amara was already outside. She stood in the yard speaking with a nurse in pale blue scrubs. Tunde, weaker still, but no longer burning with fever, sat wrapped in a blanket on a chair near the doorway. The old auntie shelled peas in a basin beside him. Nia saw Amara first and stopped breathing for a second. Musa felt it before he saw it, the silent collision of longing and fear inside a child who had lost trust too publicly to run toward it without caution. Amara looked up. For one brief moment, all three of them held still. Then Nia opened the car door and stepped out. Amara's composure, so carefully worn these past weeks, broke first through the eyes. They filled instantly, not with theatrical tears, just the helpless shine of love arriving before defense could stop it. "Nia," she whispered. The girl took 3 uncertain steps forward. "I missed you." That was all it took. Amara dropped to her knees and Nia ran the rest of the way. They held each other in the yard while the nurse looked away politely and the old auntie smiled into her basin. Musa stood beside the car and did not move. This moment was not his to enter. He had done enough entering where he did not belong. He watched Nia's face press into Amara's shoulder, watched Amara close her eyes and hold the child as if some torn part of the world had just been stitched badly but sincerely back together. After a while, Nia pulled back and asked in a shaky voice, "Are you still angry with me?" Amara's face changed with pain. "No, never with you." But I didn't speak. Amara cupped her face gently. "You were a child in a room full of adults acting badly. That was never your shame to carry." Musa looked down. The words reached him too. Eventually Amara rose and turned toward him. Their eyes met. No softness yet, but no open barrier either. "His doctor says the new treatment is helping," she said, glancing toward Tunda. Musa nodded. "I'm glad." The nurse stepped forward and spoke to Amara quietly about the next appointment, then left through the gate. Once she was gone, the yard fell into an awkward but honest stillness. Nia broke it first. "Papa showed me the foundation papers." Amara looked at Musa, then back at Nia. "Did he?" Nia nodded eagerly now. "It has your name, and it helps people like Tunda, and women who get blamed unfairly." She hesitated. "Will you really do it?" Amara answered, without looking away from Musa. "Only if it means something." Musa stepped closer then, but not too close. "It will." She studied him. "Words," she said. "Yes," he answered. "So I brought more than words." He opened the back door of the car and removed a slim leather folder, handing it to her. Inside were final trustee documents, her appointment terms, full independent authority over program oversight, and a personal letter from Musa unsigned, because he wanted her to read it first as a man's truth, not a billionaire's statement. Amara flipped through the pages slowly. Then she stopped at the governance structure and looked up sharply. "You gave veto power." "Yes. Over spending decisions, case approvals, public campaigns, and hiring, yes." She kept reading. The old auntie watched with quiet satisfaction. Nia, impatient with adult tension, moved to Tunda and sat beside him. Within minutes she was describing the mansion garden, the fountain, and a ridiculously large mango tree, as if trying to lure him into health through sheer detail. He listened with tired fascination. Amara closed the folder at last. "You're serious," she said. Musa held her gaze. "I should have been serious earlier." The corner of her mouth shifted. Not a smile, not yet, but something less guarded. She looked toward Nia, then toward Tunda, then back at the folder. "I will help build it," she said at last. "But I will not return to the house as a nanny. I know. I will come for meetings. I will see Nia. I will work. But I keep my own dignity, my own decisions, my own name." "Yes, and if you begin behaving like the old Musa again, I leave." This time he did smile faintly. "That seems fair." She almost smiled back. Almost. The old auntie rose and clapped her hands once. "Good," she declared. "Then all of you stop standing like mourners. Sit down." It was impossible not to obey her. They sat in mismatched chairs in the yard while tea was made. Nia and Tunda began talking more easily. Rain threatened overhead but held off. Somewhere nearby, children shouted over a football match. A woman selling roasted corn passed the gate, singing under her breath. Ordinary life moved around them. And for the first time, Musa did not feel above it, apart from it, or untouched by it. He felt accountable to it. As the afternoon softened, Nia wandered to the gate with Tunde to show him how the sky looked when clouds broke over the lane. Their voices drifted back in fragments. The old auntie nodded off for a few minutes in her chair, tea balanced miraculously in one hand. Musa and Amara sat in a quieter corner of the yard. After a long silence, Musa spoke. "The day I followed you here," he said, "I thought I would uncover a thief." Amara did not answer. "I froze because I realized I had not found a thief," he continued. "I had found the cost of my own blindness." She looked at him, then really looked. And something in her expression softened not into forgiveness, but into recognition that he had suddenly stopped telling the story in the language of his own innocence. "Some truths arrive late," she said. "Yes, but late is still better than never." He let that settle. At the gate, Nia laughed suddenly at something Tunda said. The sound cut through the yard like sunlight through storm cloud. Musa turned toward it and felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. Weeks ago, that laughter had seemed gone from his life. Now it had returned smaller and more careful, but real. He looked back at the cracked house, the rusted gate, the patched roof, the very place that had once made his blood run cold. He understood now why that moment had frozen him. Because the poorest house he had ever stepped near had contained more loyalty, sacrifice, and moral courage than the wealthiest room in his mansion had shown that day. He had arrived there certain he would expose someone else's ugliness. Instead, he had met his own. And because of that terrible mercy, he had been given one last chance to change. By the time he rose to leave, the sky had begun to clear. Naya hugged Amara again. Tunda gave a shy wave. The old auntie blessed everyone loudly enough for the whole lane to hear. Amara stood by the gate holding the leather folder against her chest, not smiling, but no longer looking at Musa like a closed door. That was enough for now. As Musa walked back toward the car, he paused and looked once more at the small house that had unmade him and remade him. He had once believed wealth made a man powerful. Now he knew better. Power was not in money or walls or silence or being believed first. Power was in what a person chose to do after discovering the truth. And standing before that poor, battered home, Musa understood at last the place that had made him freeze was also the place that had taught him how to become human again. In the end, Musa did not lose his peace because money was stolen. He lost it because he finally saw how quickly power can become cruelty when it is mixed with pride, pain, and unchecked judgment. The deepest wound in this story was never the missing cash. It was the way a human soul was judged before it was heard. Amara's suffering reminds us that dignity is often the first thing the poor are forced to defend, even when they have done nothing wrong. And Musa's journey reminds us of something equally important. A person is not redeemed by discovering the truth, but by what they do after the truth exposes them. Real justice is not just punishing the guilty. Real justice is restoring the wounded, admitting our own failure, and choosing humility over ego. Real love is not control. It is presence. It is listening. It is having the courage to say, "I was wrong," and then living differently afterward. Sometimes the people who seem weakest are carrying the greatest strength, and sometimes the homes with the least money hold the richest kind of humanity. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments, what was the most powerful lesson for you? And do you believe Musa truly changed, or was it too late? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoy emotional stories about truth, justice, and healing, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more.